Welcome back to Educator.com's English Grammar course. This lesson is on modifiers and their placement. Let's get started. Alright, there are several kinds of modifiers in the English language sentence. We're going to begin with adjectives and adverbs, what they are and what they do. We're going to look at how to say what you mean, make the correct choice between adverbs and adjectives, and how to tell the difference between good, bad, well, and badly, and how to use them correctly. We're going to look at comparisons, the comparative and superlative forms of adjectives, more and less, and we're going to look at double comparisons and the dreaded double negatives. Then finally, we're going to look at modifier placement. We're going to look at dangling modifiers, limiting modifiers, interrupter modifiers, and split infinitives. All right, adjectives and adverbs. As you probably remember from our lessons on adjectives and adverbs, they modify nouns and pronouns. They tell us which one, what kind, or how many, or how someone or something looks, smells, tastes, or feels. For example, the shopkeeper was helpful and friendly. Both of these modify shopkeeper. I'd like to try that burgundy loafer. Burgundy modifies loafer on the wire rack. Please in size 8. Now what about adverbs? Well, as you may remember from our lesson on them, they modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. They are often formed by adding the suffix ly to an adjective, and they tell us where, when, how, and to what extent. We drifted slowly away. Both of these modify drifted. We drifted how? Slowly. We drifted where? Away. I will never eat here again. All of these things modify eat. How will I eat? Never. Where will I eat? Here. When will I eat? Again. All right, say what you mean. Using adjectives and adverbs properly isn't just a matter of being grammatically correct. This isn't just about being proper, it's about being clear. Using one of them instead of the other can drastically change your meaning. For example, Ilka found the test easy. Ilka found the test easily. Now your problem here is the verb found. It can be an action verb, I look for something and I find it. It can also be a linking verb, indicating someone's opinion of something or the perception of it. So, if Ilka found the test easy, well then it's a linking verb and the test was simple. If Ilka found the test easily, found is an action verb and she located it without having any difficulty. So, your choice of words determines your meaning. All right, good and bad, well and badly. Good and bad are adjectives. They modify nouns and pronouns. Always, always, always. This is very good cheese. Spot is a bad dog. He chewed a leg off a chair. Well and badly, by contrast, are adverbs. They modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. This cheese has been made very well. Well modifies made. How was it made? Well. Spot behaved badly. How did Spot behave? Spot behaved badly. Modifies behave. All right. So, if you're trying to decide whether you use good or well, or bad or badly, ask yourself whether you want an adjective or an adverb. What are you modifying? There is, however, one exception, one case where well can be an adjective, and that is when it refers to the state of someone's health. So if you ask, how are you feeling? Maybe someone's just had a cold, and they say, I'm good. They're wrong. They're wrong, wrong, wrong. They're always wrong. If they are talking about their health, you're supposed to say, I'm well. That's how you say it. All right, see if you can find the correct word for each of these sentences. How bad or badly was he hurt? Please be careful or carefully. It's not a good or well situation, but we'll get through it good or well enough. Take a moment, pause the video if you need to. And here we are. How badly was he hurt? In this case, badly modifies hurt, so you need an adverb, badly. Please be careful. Well, be is a linking verb. So careful actually modifies the implied subject, you, so you need an adjective. It's not a good situation, good modifies situation, but we'll get through it well enough. Well is how we'll get through it, so we need an adverb. All right, let's look at comparisons. Most adjectives and adverbs come in three forms: the positive, the comparative, and the superlative. Positive is used to modify. It's the one that we normally think of when someone says adjectives or adverbs. The comparative and superlative forms are used in comparisons to say that something is more or less this or that. Now, here's the rule. For one and two syllable adjectives and some one syllable adverbs, the comparative is formed by adding er. So you go from happy to happier. For longer adjectives and most adverbs, including all that end in ly, use more or less in front. Use the comparative to compare two things, exactly two things, no more, no less. So this room is nicer than that one. You're comparing this room and that room. You turn nice into nicer. The bed is more comfortable. Well, you're still comparing two things, so you're still using the comparative, but comfortable is too long to just say You can't say comfortabler. It just sounds strange. So you say more comfortable. You also say it's also less expensive. Again, you're comparing two things. The word's too long to have er stuck on the end, so you say less expensive. All right. Now, for one and two syllable, for longer adjectives, to form the superlative. One and two syllable adjectives, you form the superlative by adding est, est. So good, better, best. For longer adjectives and most adverbs, including all that end in ly, use most and least. Use the superlative to compare three or more things. At least three or more. Have to have that if you're going to use the superlative, because if you only had two, you'd be using the comparative. So this is the nicest room in the hotel. Now you're comparing this room to all the rooms in the hotel. Presumably there are three or more of them. So you say it's the nicest. Its bed is the most comfortable. It's also the least expensive. All right. Now, there are two sets of words that have irregular comparative and superlative forms, and they are, of course, the ones we use most. Good and well both become better and best. Bad and badly both become worse and worst. Let's look at some examples. See if you can find the comparative and superlative forms of each of these three words. Scary, beloved, and surprisingly. All right, scary becomes scarier. We have the and the y becomes an I, as it very often does in English, and it then becomes scariest. Beloved, well, beloved is too long to become beloveder, so it becomes more beloved and most beloved. And surprisingly is too long to be surprisingly-er, and it also ends in ly, so it's more surprisingly and most surprisingly. All right, double comparisons and double negatives. The comparative and superlative take only one form, either the suffix and est, or more and less, most and least on the beginning. You cannot use the two forms together. It is wrong to say, this is the most fanciest hotel room I've ever seen. Wrong, wrong, wrong. You have to say, this is the fanciest. That tells you everything you need to know. Most is just pointless. You can say it's the fanciest or the most elaborate if you really want to use most and get yourself a longer adjective. Okay, similarly, you only use one negative to express a negative meaning. In fact, two negatives make a positive, just like in math where two minuses cancel each other out. So, to say it is a single negative to say I was unhappy with the contract. I looked at the contract, unhappy. It's positive to say I was not unhappy with the contract. We can use this. It's a device called alidity, but it removes the negative meaning. To say I was not unhappy with the contract means that I was at least content. I was okay with it. I might even have been happy. All right. The adverbs hardly, barely, and scarcely are inherently negative. Every time you use them to modify an adjective, you're being negative. So, don't pair them with a negative like not, never, or none. So, you may have heard someone say, I can't hardly see a thing through this fog. Wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You say, I can hardly see a thing through this fog. Hardly creates your negative, and you only need one. All right. Correct any modifier errors in these sentences. I am the most luckiest person in the world. Who is the greatest genius, Einstein or Leonardo da Vinci? This is much more worse than I thought. Take a good look. Pause the video if you need to. All right. I am the luckiest person in the world. We don't need most. We already have that S. We don't need both. Who is the greatest genius? Einstein or Leonardo da Vinci is correct as is. We only used greatest. We didn't say most greatest or greaterest. And this is much worse than I thought. We don't need more because we've already got worse. Okay, now let's look at the placement of modifiers. Whether a single word or a long phrase, a modifier should be as close as possible to the word or words being modified. A misplaced modifier appears to modify a different word or phrase from the word the writer intended, often with humorous effect. So, let's look at the sentence. Lost deep in a daydream, Ed's boss startled him when she walked into his office. Wrong. If Ed was the one who got startled, he's probably the one who was having the daydream. But lost deep in a daydream seems to modify Ed's boss. So now we have the zombie boss walking around the office. That may be funny, but it's probably not what you meant. It's correct to say, lost deep in a daydream, Ed was startled when his boss walked in. It's right there, it's nice and close, everybody knows what you mean, so it's correct. All right. The volunteers who help us out occasionally want permanent paid positions. Oh, that's pretty ambiguous. Do the volunteers only help you out occasionally? Do they only occasionally want those positions? Well, let's see. If you mean that the help is only occasional, then you say the volunteers who occasionally help us out want permanent paid positions. That's clear. Or you can say occasionally the volunteers who help us out want permanent paid positions. That's also clear. You have to make sure you put the modifier near what it's modifying and in such a way that it cannot be confused. All right, a dangling modifier. A dangling modifier is an adjective, word, phrase, or clause that lacks a clear referent. We don't know what it's referring to. The word or words it modifies are never specifically stated. A dangling modifier often begins with a present participle or gerund. That's an ing verb. So, lurching violently in the waves, the captain was afraid of capsizing. Captains don't lurch. They just don't. They may cling to things that are lurching, but they themselves do not lurch unless, I suppose, you're talking about Captain Jack Sparrow and he's why the rum is gone. Captains don't lurch. Boats do, but there is no boat in this sentence, so this is a dangling modifier. It's in the wrong place. It needs to modify something that can lurch. All right, how do you fix a dangling modifier when you find it? Well, what you do is you move it close to the word or phrase that it modifies, adding that word if necessary. So you'd have to put a boat in that sentence. Or you rewrite the sentence. So let's take a look at this one. After seeing the flooded basement, the house was taken off the market. Well, after seeing the flooded basement should logically modify house. But how can a house see anything? They don't have eyes. So you change it to, after the inspector saw the flooded basement, the house was taken off the market. So now it's the inspector doing the seeing, and it makes sense. All right. Correct the dangling modifiers in these sentences. Growing up an only child, my parents gave me all of their attention. While preparing dinner, a mouse ran across the counter and disappeared behind the oven. Sleeping peacefully on the beach, the sudden storm took us by surprise. Take a good look. Pause the video if you need to. All right. The problem with the first sentence was, growing up an only child, my parents gave me all of their attention. Well, how would my parents grow up an only child? That would be only one only child, and most people have at least two parents biologically. So we change it to, because I was an only child, my parents gave me all of their attention. While I was preparing dinner, remember I is now doing the preparing, a mouse ran across the counter and disappeared behind the oven. If the mouse was not preparing dinner, you need to say who was, so we add the I. And because we were sleeping peacefully on the beach, the sudden storm took us by surprise. Once again, we've added the subject, we. So in the previous sentence, sleeping peacefully on the beach would have modified storm. Now, sleeping peacefully on the beach modifies we, and all is right with the world once again. All right, what are limiting modifiers? Limiting modifiers include such adverbs as almost, even, just, nearly, and only. These modifiers belong right in front of the word they limit. So, it's wrong to say, the workers have finished nearly remodeling the kitchen. Wait, they finished almost remodeling it? Their job was to almost fix things, but not totally? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So you say, the workers have nearly finished remodeling the kitchen. It's the finishing that's almost done, not the remodeling. All right, this is one of my favorite examples of how placing a limiting modifier in a different place can completely change the meaning of the sentence. She told me that she loved me. I'll take the word only and stick it in here. She only told me that she loved me. That's all she did. All right. She told only me that she loved me. Well, now she's only telling me. Nobody else gets to know. She told me only that she loved me. That's all she told me. She didn't mention that, for example, she had the Black Plague. She told me that only she loved me. No one else loves you, only I do. She told me that she only loved me. It's not like she liked me or anything. She only loved me. Or she told me that she loved only me. I don't love anybody else. Also very dramatic, but depending on where only goes in the sentence, you have a completely different statement. So be very careful where you put your limiting modifiers. All right, interrupting modifiers. What are those? Interrupting modifiers come between the subject and the verb. Avoid putting lengthy modifiers between subjects and verbs or between helping and main verbs. And don't put any adverbs between verbs and their objects. Never, ever, ever. So, Captain Jones, after 14 years at sea, finally returned home. Well, we took this whole detour in the sentence between Captain Jones and returned home. We didn't really need to do that. It slowed things down. People tend to get confused. So we change it to, after 14 years at sea, Captain Jones finally returned home. Finally is a nice short modifier, so it can stay. All right. However, while we're on the subject of interrupting modifiers, who, that, and which clauses, if not excessively long, are acceptable between subject and verb because they very often add extra details about the subject. So, it is acceptable to say, my son, who is obsessed with trains, hopes to be an engineer. Not too long, and it adds information about the son. It's too long to say, my son, who has been obsessed with trains since he was 2, hopes to be an engineer. That is generally a pretty good guide. If you have to take another breath in the middle of the sentence, you've probably crammed too much stuff in there. So, you can correct that to, obsessed with trains since he was 2, my son hopes to be an engineer. We've got my son hopes to be an engineer in one chunk that you can say in one breath. All right, split infinitives. Gene Roddenberry has much to answer for. Technically, you shouldn't put anything between the to and the verb in an infinitive. So that bit at the beginning of Star Trek where he says that our mission is to boldly go where no one has gone before, no, it really should be to go boldly or boldly to go. Unfortunately, that sounded kind of weird, so Gene Roddenberry stuck the adverb in the middle of the infinitive, and now the rule in English is, if it doesn't sound too weird, stick it in the middle. If it does sound weird, take it out. So, I would like to actually to hear the rest of the story, so please be quiet. That just sounds kind of weird. So we put actually in the wrong place just so we could keep to hear together. So, go with your ear, go with what sounds right. I would like to actually hear the rest of the story, so please be quiet. Now it sounds a little better. All right, let's do some practice. Correct any modifier errors that you can find in the following sentences. Be sure to thoroughly chew your food before you swallow it. Are you ready yet? Already, it's time to go. Renee Yeager, author of several self-help books and creator of a series of children's workbooks, will be the keynote speaker at the conference. Oh, that breath should have told you something. Take a good look. Pause the video if you need to. All right. Be sure to chew your food thoroughly before you swallow it. This one is a little bit of a judgment call, but you really do want to keep to chew your food together in one block because it's one activity. So you put thoroughly on the end. It's a bit clearer, doesn't break up the rhythm as much. Are you ready yet? It's already time to go. You can stick already as close as possible to what it actually modifies. It's like only, remember those. All right. The author of several self-help books and creator of a series of children's workbooks. That was long, wasn't it? So, when you have a sentence that requires multiple breaths, you want to make sure that you have the subject and the verb in the same breath. So we've moved that whole clause in there to the beginning of the sentence so it can have its own little space, and then you take a breath, and then you say the subject and verb. The author of several self-help books and creator of a series of children's workbooks, Renee Yeager will be the keynote speaker at the conference. Now it makes sense, it's a little bit smoother, and you don't have an asthma attack in the middle of reading your own writing. That's all for this lesson. Thank you for watching, educator.com.